Okay, so we should be up now. We're live. Okay. Okay, no worries. Thank you so much. Have you seen how many of these how the police plane pilots? Thank you. Thank you, God. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for understanding. Lord. Okay, then you know what? Let me do this. Let me see if I can change these settings again. Okay. Uh, oh,
Testing, testing. ABC 1 2 3. Testing, testing. ABC 1 2 3. Testing,
That's
testing.
perfect.
okay,
ABC
great.
1 2 3.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Paul Trombley. Cloudy skies with a few peaks of sun today, with a chance for scattered thunderstorms. Highs level off around 83. Westerly winds
How are
8
your
to
parents
15
doing?
miles per hour. Lows level off around 60 tonight.
They're good. Just got back from a little quick trip vacation. Trying to enjoy this retirement life.
Bright
Oh, are
sunshine
they?
expected
Oh,
Thursday with
now you
daytime
know
highs
Dad ain't doing that.
85.
Oh man, I think he starts at the University of Chicago soon.
This is Ron Whittingham, and I'm
Okay.
from Megan Financial.
You know.
When is the last time he took an actual vacation?
You know he's not into
Can you
that.
recall?
He's not into that.
Yeah.
We just not into
Teaching
it.
financial literacy to our clients,
Yeah.
prepare them for a great future and a dignified retirement.
Until it's something I never really thought about with him.
401ks,
Till you get a little
Yeah.
older, you
we
go.
make sure that you understand it all. Give us a call at 708.
We don't. That's something we don't do.
We're Megan Financial.
Yeah.
We're your partners in a happy
And
retirement.
all of our
Or visit us at
vacations
ENT.com.
were wrapped around work. You know, and that's just how he is.
Yeah.
My mother's like, I can't believe. I said, yeah, you signed on to this. I mean, because but they're both movement people.
Yes.
And then I was talking to Andrew Young's daughter, and her, I think she was, Andrea may have
And
been,
I am joined by Maurice Mitchell,
she was in
National
grammar
Director
school.
at
But she
Working
said, I
Families
remember
Party. What gives you hope, Maurice?
my spring break was the summer march.
Wow.
And that's, we kind of laughed about it because, we understand how, it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how you do your vacation. When you do this work, that kind of comes with it.
Yes, man.
But that's why ministry's hard, because you never turn it off.
Can't turn off. Yep.
You never turn it off. You see someone get sick someplace, it's you don't turn it off, and so there's a real price that you pay for it.
Play WCPT.
Yes.
WCPT from
Very true.
And it can be a little
I'm Shanola Hampton.
exhausting, right?
Every day, millions of
Yes, ma'am.
And so that's why you have to
Today, I will
take
share
care of
with you
yourself
some
if you
of their
look up at
experiences.
it's a lot.
Between paying
And
for
people,
medications
and that's why many are called, few are chosen, and you just called to. It's a life that you're called to, and that's why so many marriages, ministerial marriages, don't make it.
I thought pantry
Because it's a tough life.
But anybody
And
could
people
do
don't know
Yes.
that, you know, they don't.
Yeah, they don't know the inside work.
They do not. I was, you know, I had a nice talk, and I can say this even as we're on the air. It was Pastor Bryant, Jamal's father, who really pulled me up to that. I had the privilege of
Okay.
flying with him to Detroit, and then we ended up talking for hours afterwards. So we were on the same plane, and we were just talking about the tough aspect
And we're
of,
live here outside the Perez family home, just waiting for the.
you know,
and
of
there they go.
life and
Almost on time,
ministry.
Miss
It's the
You know,
life.
most of these
Yeah.
marriages don't make it. I said, you know, I didn't realize that.
Looks like Dad
He
has
said,
the bags.
step back and
Daughter
think
is
about
bringing
it.
up the rear.
I said, I
Mhm.
really,
The
I guess,
bag
I
wasn't
said, I was with the
closed.
people
Diapers and toys
who-
are everywhere.
who made it. He said,
Ooh,
but most
Mom
people
has
don't.
just nailed the perfect car
They
seat
don't.
model for the toddler. And now
I
the
said,
eldest
wow,
daughter, who looks to
okay,
be about
well,
9 or 10, has secured
there is
herself in
that.
the booster seat. Dad zips the bag
Hmm.
closed, and they're off.
It was tough.
But looks like Mom
It was
doesn't
tough.
realize her coffee cup
But,
is still
you know,
on the roof of the car.
The beauty
and
is,
there it
you know,
goes. That's a shame. That mug was a
you know,
fan
I
favorite.
remember
Don't sweat the small
Isaiah
stuff. Just remember
Thomas
the
was at an
seat
event
size.
that we
Making sure your
had,
kids are buckled correctly in the right seat
and
for
my father
every
was
size.
trying to raise
Learn
money.
about NHTSA guidelines, choose the
You know,
right
and
seat.
and Isaiah got up and he took the mic from Reverend. He said, with all due respect, would you allow me? And my father looked at him. He said, Reverend is raising money for people like me. He said, my mother and I used to get on the bus, thank you so much, and come from the west side to get the Christmas basket.
Mm.
I said, oh, wow.
Wow.
He said, everybody was so kind to us. He said, but I'm that person. So there you go. So you never know,
Yes,
and
man.
then you bump into a. Oh, could you when the pastor's on, please put me on mute so that I can pull down a couple more stories, okay?
I'm urging
Okay.
Thank you, dear. Have a great show.
to get educated.
Yes, let's have an awesome show.
Well,
Make
now,
it part
there
of
you
your
go. Now,
cancer
there's that.
conversation.
Excuse
And if
me.
you have LE, share your story with patients and doctors.
And everybody
working
send
together,
Alex some
we
love
can
today. I
learn
love working with
and
this
live.
young man.
Oh, thank you very much. 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
Emphaticnetwork.org.
Alexa,
Stand by.
Okay, let's get to it.
WCPT from TuneIn.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
this is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, August 29, 2023. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Get a little bit of feedback. Working that out. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, my home in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Hey, Carol, my sister from another mister out there in the hills of Beverly, and Dave Dowling. How you doing, sweetie? Robert Williams, Andre here in Chicago, my god brother, and Angela Burns and Max out there in D.C. On my way to D.C. Going to see you, Max. Dave Dowling and Barbara Bacon in Oak Park, and so many of you. Please join everybody on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Let's talk about this court docket, whether the former president, Trump, can run again or not. You need to be 35, natural born citizen, have lived here 14 years. Former President Trump meets those requirements, but what about this 14th Amendment? What about inciting a sedition, an uprising, an insurrection? What about that? Was he doing that, or was he questioning an election? There's a whole lot that we want to tease out today with John Nichols and with Attorney David Slane, that's concerned of his, and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary. We're going to first talk about this American military budget. It's very, very difficult to get the budget. They'll say it's 3% of American spending, and then they'll tell you this 3% of the GDP. Yeah. But it's when you go to the National Priorities Project, when they really break this down, that you see that it's 56% of our budget that goes to the military. We spend 10 times what we spend on education on the military. What do you think about that? I mean, as our children, we saw during the pandemic, they weren't connected digitally. They did not have computers. That you can get computers, you can take care of everybody for what we're spending in these military adventures all around the world that are not working, by the way. So let's talk about that on the Santita Jackson show. And let's get to these headlines so we can get to the rest of the show. A judge set a March 4th trial date in Donald Trump's federal election case. That's the day before Super Tuesday, by the way, everybody. It's far sooner than April 2026 that the Trump lawyers requested. He faces charges plotting to overturn the 2020 election. It clashes, of course, with the 2024 campaign schedule. What is going to happen? And in Georgia, former Trump chief of staff Mark Meadows yesterday testified in person, everybody, about former President Trump's efforts to overturn Joe Biden's victory in the state in his effort to move his case from the state to the federal level. Florida is bracing for a major hurricane, and now, in fact, it is a hurricane. Idalia is a Category 1. It's expected to hit Florida's Gulf Coast tomorrow morning. People are being asked to leave, but that window has shut. So please, if you know anyone down there, or if anyone there is down there is listening, please seek shelter right away. A UNC Chapel Hill faculty member was killed in a campus shooting, everybody. The incident shut down UNC Chapel Hill for 3 hours yesterday and sparked urgent warnings for students to take shelter. Each person was taken into custody, but neither the suspect nor the victim have been named by authorities. A top Spanish soccer official, that is the head of the federation, Luis Rubiales, who kissed the player Jenny Hermoso without her permission on the lips after Spain won the Women's World Cup this month. Well, will he be able to keep his job? Yes or no? The investigation was announced yesterday. His mother's on a hunger strike even. We'll see what's going to happen, everybody. And the era of the 9-to-5 workday may be over. In most of the country, only about half of the office visits last for at least 6 hours, according to Wi-Fi data. Before the pandemic, 84% of visits lasted that long or longer. A transformation, according to this study, is taking place in the workplace. Employees may be returning to the office, but they're taking advantage of an unspoken new flexibility. Empty offices could spur an urban doom loop, economists fear. In fact, what are they going to do with all of that office space? I don't know. In Chicago, 82 degrees will be high, scattered showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 80 degrees and clear. Major League Baseball, the Orioles 9. They shut out the White Sox 9-0. The Brewers 6. The Cubs 2. The Twins 10. The Guardians 6. In the WNBA, the Sky will be playing the Sparks tonight, and the Lynx will be playing the Mystics. And those are the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. The pastor of the New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church, I'm so glad to say, of course, Pastor Stephen Thurston, who you can hear on and really participate. It's almost like therapy. It really is. And we need it. And I think we shouldn't be ashamed.
We need it.
When we need it. Every Friday at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook. So it's wonderful, wonderful being with you on Tuesdays and any other day that I can.
Yes, ma'am. Always enjoy connecting with you and this amazing audience.
Oh, absolutely. So talk to me. Well, first of all, very quickly, how are you enjoying pastoring? How many generations of you have done this?
Yeah, 4 generations. Wow. And it's good to be back in the saddle. I had an 11-year hiatus from New Covenant, so it's good to be back. The people seem excited, and we're kicking off doing some cool stuff for people in the community and congregation. That's what it's all about, transforming and changing lives and giving people a little hope, a little gasoline to help them fuel their lives to move forward.
Every day. You need it. You need it. You need it. Blessings to you. Blessings to you. Well,
thank you.
Us. We need the good news.
One of my favorite scriptures, Santita, is found in Mark chapter 12, verse 30 and 31.
You're muted.
And the text says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. I've heard this text quoted so many times, and something stood out to me. Love your neighbor as yourself. And as I look at humanity and wonder why it is that we treat other human beings in such inhumane ways, it dawned on me that many of us don't know how to love ourselves, Thus, we don't know how to love our neighbor. And so I want to remind us today that self-love is important, it's critical, and it's crucial, and it's okay to engage. Because I know that term self-love, it can sound a little cheesy or even egotistical. But the truth is that self-love is a hugely underrated key in finding long-term happiness, inner peace, and living a full life. Self-love is crucial because you extend your world, your external world, by doing the things that you do. Because
Dr. Knighton is on. It's a little louder where she is, so she's currently on mute.
How we impact and affect other people. And the problem is that many of the teachings on self-love can be very surface level. Yeah, it's great to be able to look in the mirror, embrace our flaws, but real self-love is about so much more than that. It's about honoring yourself and recognizing your worth. It's about putting yourself first, and yes, it's okay to do that at times, and taking care of your life. Self-love is caring deeply about yourself to the point where you recognize things, you recognize people and thoughts and energy that doesn't serve you. Most of us don't experience self-love because we overcomplicate it. We put up all these walls and these barriers that keep us from being content with ourselves. We'll say, I'll love myself when, and then fill in the blank.
Yes.
I'll be happy when, then fill in the blank. And here's the question we all need to wrestle with. What have I put in between myself and unconditional love for myself? Let me ask you this question this way. What would change in your life if you chose to love yourself like right now? So somebody's saying, well, Stephen, I hear you, but what's the secret to real self-love? Great question. I got an answer. Real self-love is about recognizing that your true identity is your inner spirit. You are a soul, not just a body. You simply have a body to carry your soul from place to place. And real self-love is about understanding that you were created by God and you are made out of the same divine energy as God. Real self-love is about realizing that you don't have to be perfect to be enough. You don't have to meet some invisible standards put in place by society, your parents, friends, colleagues, anybody else in order to feel good about yourself. Sure, you're going to make mistakes, but you're not your mistakes. Real self-love is about accepting that you aren't the same as the people you keep comparing yourself to, the people who've already achieved all those amazing things you aspire to. That's okay. You can still get it your own way and in your own time. In fact, it's more than okay because you know it's all part of your purpose here in the world to take the journey that you're taking and to experience life as you experience it. No one can compete with you at being you. So be okay with loving you as you go through this process. Real self-love is about remembering the bigger picture of who you are. You're God's unique creation, expressing itself as a human for a little while here on earth. You're meant to constantly renew yourself, your life, your desires. Step into the unknown, take some risk, and make mistakes. It's all a part of the plan. Listen, self-love, it's an integral part of living your best and happiest life. And when you work from a place of self-love, you act with a deep desire to show yourself love and compassion. So love yourself today deeply, this week deeply, this month deeply, for the rest of this year deeply, for the balance of your days. Love yourself deeply, and don't be afraid for the world to see. The more we can love ourselves and tell ourselves that it's okay to love ourselves too, the more love there is around the world. And we can always use more of that, Santita.
Amen. 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 You know, I was always told, because I struggled with weight all of my life. The first time in my life, but now is when my doctor doesn't want me to lose anymore. He's like, you are great. And that's been hard for me to wrap my mind around, quite frankly, because unconsciously, and I know my parents meant well, and my mother in particular. But as a woman, she understands the burden that weight puts on you, because she saw my social group change as I put on weight, right? And but you also take in the message that you're not enough.
Yeah.
And that if you get slim, you're going to be perfect, and it's just not true.
Right.
It's not true. There is nothing. I mean, you see, I remember meeting Jane Kennedy, the first time I met Jane Kennedy, one of those beautiful women you ever want to meet, but that's on the inside, everybody. She's a wonderful human being. And she would talk about the trouble she had trying to get dates. And I was like, what? She said, "Oh, the things that she was going through and how people would be unkind to her, and she wasn't whining about it."
Yeah.
I think I'd come home from school. She was in town for an event, and she was staying at our house. And she came to me she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Actually, I didn't know it showed." I'll never forget that about her. I'll never forget that about her, just how her kindness. But everybody love yourselves. What did I think? Bernard Jordan said, "Don't love me." What did they say? Treat me the way I want to be treated. No, he said, "Don't do that because you don't know how to treat yourself. Treat me right," which is what I'm getting from you today. Oh, Pastor,
That's it. That's the key.
I love it. How can we worship with you?
Hey, Sunday mornings at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you're in Chicago, 9 to 10:15, I'm going to get you out in time to be the first one at brunch. You can worship with us there at New Covenant on 77th and Cottage Grove. We're also on Facebook and YouTube, New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church. And you can go to our website and catch us on the live stream. So you got plenty of options. No excuse not to engage with us. And we're in this amazing series that we started this past Sunday called What If? I'm challenging everybody to start thinking differently about life and not to be afraid to ask the question, what if? So that we can change our perspective and maybe blaze a new trail down a new path that will lead us to a new life.
Amen. What if? What if? What if? Oh, Pastor Stephen Thurston, I love the fact that you help me to think, and use everything that is available to me. We love you, Pastor Thurston. 77th and Cottage Grove, 9 o'clock on Sunday, 10:15 a.m. on Sunday. Get there, everybody. 3 p.m. Central Standard Time every Friday on Facebook. And I love you. Can't wait to see you.
Love you too. All right.
Dr. Shanina Knighton, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
You talk to me. What's on your mind today in the world of infection prevention?
So it's actually interesting because just thinking about what Pastor Thurston just said in regards to remembering the bigger picture of who I am, I think that is so key today, just to even think about what I wanted to talk about. And that's just us remembering the bigger picture and the interruptions that COVID-19 or just illness in general causes in our lives. And so when I say that, for example, when you end up with a cold or you end up with COVID, you end up with the flu or any other kind of illness, your body has to stop and it has to process and do what it needs to do best. And unfortunately, while we want to continue doing our day-to-day, or we may want to continue eating in a certain manner, our body actually tells us, like, no, it's time for you to sit down. And so during those times when we have those interruptions, that potentially means that we're, losing wages at work. That might mean that we might, miss an event. We may miss an important part of something. We may just be thrown off of our schedule. And so the reminder is when we're looking at the bigger picture, reminding ourselves to look at the bigger picture as it relates to health and as it relates to prevention. And so remembering that, yes, while we cannot see germs, taking a couple of minutes to make sure that you are mindful and cleaning your hands correctly can go a long way when it comes to preventing being ill. Being mindful that when you decide to do an event, that you remind people, hey, while I want you to attend, health is important. So if you are not well, then stay home. It's also making sure that you are making sure that others are vigilant about their infection prevention and control practices. And I know we talk about those quite a bit. So whether that's somebody not hovering over the food, whether that's somebody that's not, licking their fingers and touching on the silverware that everyone will need to touch, it's really being mindful that you don't want other people's germs and other people don't want your germs. And so the best way to think about that, again, is when you are looking at the bigger picture around health and around infection prevention, ask yourself, how am I preventing it through practice, and how am I preventing it in terms of what it is that I'm putting in my body? as we continue to get towards that holiday season, which I talk about, and I'm giving people enough of a heads up now, that's Halloween, where there's a lot of candy. And then we follow Halloween by going directly into Thanksgiving, where there's a lot of sweets. And then we go into Christmas, where there's a lot of sweets. And so there is no secret formula of why we end up more ill during the winter months. It is because the reminder is it's 75 grams of sugar lowers your immune system for 5 hours. So if you're constantly eating sweets on top of sweets on top of sweets, and then you're dealing with stress and other factors, it is going to be likely that you would encounter a lot of colds. And so some ways to think through, how do I offset that? It's being mindful of your sugar intake. It's being mindful that you are working out. It's being mindful that you are getting enough rest. And it's being mindful that you are paying attention to the infection prevention and control practices that you do.
I appreciate it, because what do you say about infection? It is what in relation to the cure? Prevention?
Prevention is better than treatment.
Hey, you know, the old folks used to say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Amen. Prevention is better than treatment. I mean, really, change your thinking, everybody. Change it. And that's what, Pastor Thurston was talking about. We can change our thinking. We don't have to be sick. We shouldn't be. Go to Hey Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. Hey Dr. Nina, let's be mindful about our health. Really, really, really. Sending you so much love today. Making that sacrifice to be with us in the morning as she gets her kids off to school before she goes to work. Love you, Dr. Nina. Let's talk about this military budget. 56% of our budget goes to the military. We spend 10 times on the military what we spent on education. How does that sound to you? I mean, as we're talking about Trump and all these other things, and all this stuff is important. In the meantime, your money is getting voted on and spent, but not on you. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Oh, so much better. Oh, Lord. I mean, so much better. So.
See, that's always a good thing.
Oh, honey, who are you telling? Who are you telling? I mean. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I just can't wait to waiting for the weekend. Hello, sounding like the OJs, living for the weekend. Living for the weekend. I can't wait, because now I'm actually going to rest this weekend. I am actually going to rest, and I'm excited about it. I'm actually going to rest. I was going to go away, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, now since I've been, since I've been under the weather, I just didn't want to do that either. To be frank with you, I just said, let me just go on and get myself together. And now I am going to just take some time for myself. And that is that.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm going to read. And because I'm not going to lie, doing a whole lot of sleeping is not for me. But if I can read and relax, that relaxes me.
Oh, listen, I think I told you about my self-care trip that I took. I went
Reverend Gary and Dr. Gibbs are on.
I literally did just a nice disconnect trip where I went to New Orleans for a week, like just me, and literally just got a chance. Like I ended up doing like a Holiday Inn got like this resort kind of thing that is like right there in the French Quarter. I like literally just ate and went back to my room and or my apartment and did what I wanted to do. So if I decided I wanted to read, I read. If I wanted to watch a little bit of TV, I did that. If I wanted to write, I did that. And the only time I left was when I knew that I wanted to go out and try some great food, And that was it. And so I felt like I needed that disconnect because I wasn't responsible for doing anything. I couldn't get nowhere to solve no problem. So it was like everything was to wait until I got back.
But you say, honey, I can't. That's why I love being on the train. I'm like, honey, there's nothing I can do. I mean, I can't. I gotta
That's
wait.
it.
I gotta
So
wait
when I
till I
came
pull up to my
back,
destination. Did you feel better?
I did. I felt a lot better. I felt rejuvenated to come back with a different attitude. Because I was fussing these kids out. And you know, when sometimes when you just start fussing too much, you're like, all right, well, maybe I need to reevaluate.
Absolutely. You need a moment. Need a moment. Let me say hello
Yes,
to.
I was happy I took it.
I'm glad you took it. I wish I thought about this. I think, but relaxing for me will be not having to move. I won't have
1
to be
minute.
up at 2 a.m. Stand by. Dr. Gibbs?
Morning, Santita.
Thank you. I know you're like, what? This woman, she wants me on the show every day. Yes, I do. No shame. I have no shame. Reverend Dr. Yeri,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I thought we'd begin
20
the
seconds.
day with something a little different. This is very real.
10 seconds.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Please join my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And of course, we're coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820 here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I need you to support independent voices, independent journalism. Please stay tuned for Tom Hartman and Stephanie Miller and Patty Vasquez and, of course, Joan Esposito here on this show. You can 24/7, you'll get the best radio and the best news and information in the world right here on WCPT and AM 950 Radio. Hey, everybody, let's talk as we talk about Trump and all of these things that are going on. And we're going to be talking about that at the top of the hour. Should he still be able to run? Can he still run? Technically, yes, but the 14th Amendment, some people are saying, well, it might be a sticking point. It might not. I don't know. But U.S. lawmakers, while they're on recess, there are some advocacy groups, at least 20 of them, who are joining with Congressman Jamal Bowman out of New York in calling for transparency in military spending. They will... And trying to find out how much of our money goes to the military is very difficult. If you just Google it and you just try to find a simple, straightforward answer, you can't do it. You'll hear something about the GDP, and then you'll say, okay, it's actually 3%. No, it's 17%. No, it's 56%, according to the National Priorities Project, everybody. 56%, at least, of your dollars go to military spending. Military spending. Each one of our armed forces get hundreds of billions of dollars a year. They're saying it's not $1 trillion budget, but if you go to different websites on the government, they will say no, actually it's $1.7 trillion. So trying to track down these figures and looking at what this is costing us is a big deal. It's a big deal. So Jamal Bowman, the congressman from the Democrat from the great state of New York, is saying we need to know where this money is going exactly. You know how Ron Paul wanted to audit the Fed, and I agreed with that. You need to audit the Pentagon, audit our military spending, all of it, and put it in one basket, and let's ask why, how, and what. So we're talking with Reverend Dr. Todd Yeri, lawyer and part of the national leadership team at Rainbow Push. He's also the senior pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. He's a lawyer as well. And of course, brilliant historian, Dr. David Gibbs from the University of Arizona. Let me start with you, Dr. Gibbs. I mean, you do research as do you, Reverend Erie. But I mean, as an historian, you also give it social, political, and cultural context. It is so hard to find these numbers.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to find these numbers. Number one, why? And do you think it's important for us to have transparency, particularly in this area? I mean, we spend 10 times, at least 10 times, if you look at least one of these budgets, like half of 877 plus billion dollars, they say, is what we spend. And actually, when you go to the DoD website, they double that. So, but let's just go with what is stated on one of the websites. We spend 10 times on the military 10 times as much as we do on education. How, just help me to understand, what are we looking at?
I think that what you're finding here is that there's always a tendency to understate the amount spent on the military. I think the public is aware that this is coming out of their living standards. I think that there was a book published in the 1950s called How to Lie with Statistics, and to some extent that's what you're seeing here, in the sense that there are all sorts of hidden expenses in military spending that are not officially part of the military budget, but nevertheless are really part of the military budget. I mean, an example of that is a significant part of nuclear weapons development is done by the Department of Energy, officially not part of the military budget. Veterans benefits, that's the VA, that's a separate line item, not part of the military budget. Interest on the federal debt related to past military spending, again, not part of the military budget. If you add all these things together, it would increase very significantly the amount of money spent on the military. But again, there's a need to understate. There are all sorts of statistics that are, shall we say, lied about. I mean, unemployment, for example, the way it's officially calculated, understates the level of unemployment because that would make people angry if they knew the true figure. Similarly, with military spending, we try and understate the amount of military spending so as to, assuage public concerns that military spending is excessive. And there's always, I should add, a certain sense that military spending is sacrosanct. No one would ever say that, education or healthcare is sacrosanct. You can cut that. You can reduce spending on that. That's okay. But you cannot reduce spending on the military. That, whenever there are these negotiations about raising the federal debt limit, as there was recently, and everything's on the table except military spending. That's the one thing that both parties agree should not be subject to cuts when there are these emergency budget cuts. And so, one really has to raise the question of why is that so? Why is, again, people say, well, military spending is essential. Well, why is it essential? It has very little to do with defense. I think that's clear. Healthcare. I mean, people depend on healthcare for their lives. Why isn't that essential? But again, the political system has set things up so that we don't see it that way. And so we get this continual understatement of military spending as a result.
Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. Do you think that Americans would be angered by the amount of money that we're spending on the military budget? I mean, just because the net, as you've cast it very, very wide, and we're always haggling about education. We're haggling about whether we're going to give people relief during a pandemic or just to live from day to day. I mean, most Americans can't afford to rent in the city in which they work. I mean, Americans are really struggling. But no one touches the military budget. You dare not do that, and you dare not talk about it lest you be called anti-patriotic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're virtually accused of treason. And we haven't won anything since the Second World War, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that's the basic problem is that we have gotten to this sort of political culture that sort of not just glorifies the military, but views the military as almost untouchable. and beyond criticism. I think, not only would you be called unpatriotic if you did that, I think the latest one is an agent of Vladimir Putin. That's the latest iteration in terms of people who are criticizing the military. Again, the war in Ukraine is a particular case in point here. I've mentioned on the show before, but it's worth noting again that at one point about a year ago, President Biden put before Congress a request for $33 billion, mostly in military spending for Ukraine. And, Congress upped it to $40 billion. $33 billion wasn't enough. In my entire lifetime, I can never think of a program designed to help people and raise their living standards where the president brought a budget before Congress, usually way below $33 billion, I should add, and Congress said that's not enough and increased it. I've never heard of that. But with military spending, with war making, that's a perfectly acceptable activity. And again, one has to question the health of the political discourse and the political culture that engages in this kind of activity that so glorifies military spending and denigrates everything else.
What's stunning is that when you really think about it, Dr. King and former President Dwight Eisenhower, former General Eisenhower, actually agreed on
this.
That's right. I mean, am I missing something here?
No, of course, there was the famous military-industrial complex speech. Eisenhower, of course, coined that term in his farewell address in 1961. And, Martin Luther King, towards the end of his life, before he was assassinated, he was very clear that he was going to move into the issue of America's tendency towards war making and spending on war making, as opposed to social services and raising people's living standards. And so, yes, in that sense, I think there was some agreement between the two men, as different as they were.
Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, you're a minister and you are a veteran. What do you make of this? I mean, because, I remember Reverend Jackson, when he ran for president, he said, our U.S. budget is a reflection of our values. And when you look at our budget, it's a moral disgrace, not just with South Africa, but what we're doing with the military budget with respect to the rest of the budget. What do you make of this? 56% of the budget, Reverend Dr. Urey. You can look around Baltimore and Chicago, and you travel all over the country. You see the need, not just in the Black community, but you see it in all of America. Americans need support, and we're not getting it. It's all going to the military.
Well, good morning, Santita, and to Dr. Gibbs, and to those I'm sure who will be joining. There are a couple of things here at play. One is there's this unwieldy thing called defense spending, which is different than the defense budget. So the cabinet offices in this budget process, they all kind of come up with what it's going to take to kind of fulfill the mission. There are a number of items there. On the military side, you see probably a significant number for costs for personnel, but then you have equipment, then you have weapon systems, which cost a lot. But what doesn't get included in that is in the budget forecast is often mission spending. And mission spending ends up being those things, and I'll just kind of raise it the way it comes up, is you can't really have a research and development of weapon systems just have this investment sitting somewhere. You've got to have an opportunity to use it. And so there's a certain degree of necessary conflict that creates the opportunity to be able to use these weapons beyond the typical training exercises that are often done. But then there are also these other linkages with other types of spending that come maybe across other agency lines. So there's this overlap between sometimes what is transportation doing maybe in partnership with DOD as it may relate to certain maybe blended or hybrid projects that are part military, part civilian. So you've got this kind of opportunity. And I think the concern for me becomes when you start seeing these bills come up, right? Remember, the appropriations process is pretty interesting because you don't have to have for actual spending. You don't have to meet the filibuster requirement on the Senate side. You can get it by just a majority. So it allows for a lot of curious spending that gets tucked away in defense, but may not necessarily be defense related at all. Sometimes it may be what they used to call in the budgeting process pork. And so a lot of this exploration, are we really getting, is it really defense, or is defense really just kind of the catch-all, not just for military spending that doesn't have a whole lot of constraint to it? It's already increasing even from what comes out of the Defense Department. If you remember the last budget process, the president's budget came back, the appropriation came back with more than the Department of Defense even asked for. And that's kind of curious to me. If I ask for something and I'm giving you missional need and you give me one and I ask for, what that says to me is I no longer have to maintain the kind of fiscal accountability because I'm going to get the bailout all the time. Somebody else may have to worry about their budget being cut. But the Defense Department doesn't fall in that same category. So I think there are a number of things that we have to pay attention to when we start kind of tracking these numbers. But I think the key thing that we often have to pay attention to is when you hear about fiscal tightening, that we have to make budget cuts. When there's this conversation about whether or not the federal budget will be balanced and this notion about whether or not carrying deficits is a problem. The issue for me in terms of the moral quandary is the military budget cut. And when the cuts come, they always talk about the, quote, social safety net. And this is where Reverend Jackson's called to recognize that the budget is not a numbers document. It's a moral document that has numbers assigned to it. And so we prioritize what our moral commitments are as a nation based on the appropriations and the dollars we put behind needs of people and needs of conflict. And the one other thing I'll just add is that all of this conflict is not necessary for the protection of military interests across the world. Some of it is used, again, for the missions that will help facilitate not only the utility of the weapons, but destabilization in other countries. The first use of stealth warfare was the early 80s in Panama. I'm not sure where that was, but so when we look at this, I think there are a number of things that ought to give us pause, not just in terms of the amount of money, but how that money is used to exploit certain interests here, but destabilize political interest abroad. It's a very curious thing, but it should cause us to peel that onion back. Our eyes may water and we may have to cry, but get your tissue because we got to figure out what's going on here.
Amen to that. I mean, and when I think of what Representative Bowman is seeking to do, I can't help, Dr. Gibbs, but think of the March on Washington. Everyone is celebrating Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's the 60th anniversary of his I Have a Dream speech. That was not the substance of his speech. The substance of his speech was really talking about, he said, America, you have given Black people a check that has bounced, and I refuse to believe that the vaults of opportunity are empty, are bankrupt. I refuse to believe that. And we're coming here for you to make good on this check. But as he kept on going, because this was the time when my parents started to work for him, they became his staff members. He was moving from having won the Nobel Peace Prize to really the nadir of his unpopularity. More than 50% of African Americans disapproved of him when he was assassinated. More than 70% of white Americans did. So at 6 p.m., April 4th, 1968, people really didn't care about him. But by 6:15, when the news rang out that he'd been killed, he was becoming iconic. But to this point, he really looked at war as an enemy that was being waged upon the poor, Dr. Gibbs. I mean, in that Vietnam speech that Reverend Dr. Wyatt Walker, his chief of staff, said, "Martin, you have just signed your death warrant." And Dr. King said, "I know, but I had to give it." Whenever people go against the military-industrial complex, people are making those arguments about many different figures. Whenever you try to stop a war, you become an enemy of the military-industrial complex. We dropped more bombs in Vietnam than we did in all of Europe, in little Vietnam. It's just, what are we doing?
Well, the United States basically has become addicted to war. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the gentleman who spoke just before me, he, noted that so much of what we do overseas is destabilization. That's quite true. Very little of it, really none of it, in my view, has to do with defense in any meaningful sense. It's quite the opposite. These destabilization projects generate insecurity. They weaken defense of the United States. They increase dangers. I mean, an extreme, obvious case would be Iraq. Iraq was in bad shape under Saddam Hussein, no doubt about it. The U.S. invaded, overthrew Saddam Hussein, ended up killing 1 million people in Iraq. Thousands of Americans were killed as well, tens of thousands of them. Had their lives destroyed, their limbs, cut off, their brains damaged, and so on. And the country's never really been fully stabilized. The whole region of the Middle East has been destabilized by this action. It cost trillions of dollars for nothing. And so the issue is, what do we get out of this military spending? And the answer is more insecurity. For the most part, that is the result. America's decision to expand NATO and trigger the war in Ukraine, to block peace negotiations that could have ended the war early on. These things massively destabilized, the European Central Asia region, not just Ukraine, but this has global implications that are very much still with us. And this is totally unnecessary. There was no purpose for expanding NATO. In fact, there was no purpose for NATO at all after the end of the Cold War. But for the United States, there was a trade-off between power and security. And the U.S. has always chosen power over security, and the public has paid the price.
But Americans pushed back on Trump when he said NATO needs to be dissolved. But that's what Eisenhower said.
Yeah.
He said this is a 10-year project. Yep. If after 10 years, 1961, we have not been successful, then you need to dissolve it and come up with something else. And we've personalized our politics so much that we're missing the principles here, I think.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, it's basically Trump. Let me just say, I think Trump was a bad president. Okay, I would never vote for him. But it doesn't mean every single thing he says is wrong.
Broken clock is right twice a day, right? Because I'm not a Trumper, but I listen to what everybody says. I want to know what I want to know what you're talking about, and then I can consider it and say I agree with you, I disagree with you. He's not someone I support, but I agreed with that. I said that's what Eisenhower said, and Eisenhower was right.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, it's you do have this problem in the United States of a national culture and a national political system that seems to be structured around war. I should add, by the way, I remember during the Cold War, it was almost as if fighting communism was what defined being an American meant. If you were a patriotic American, it meant you supported the Cold War. You hated those who opposed the Cold War. That was what patriotism meant. If you flew the flag, that's what it meant. I think after the end of the Cold War, there was a sense of, how do we define being an American now? What defines being an American? And initially, nobody really knew. And so I think there was an effort, almost consciously maybe, to reconstruct some form of the Cold War and have a new Cold War. And conveniently, we still had Russia, I suppose, which looked a little bit like the Soviet Union. And so, you had this kind of cultural need for war, but moreover, you have vested interests that benefit from war, the military-industrial complex. And there are indeed a large power center and a lobby group, in effect. It has very little to do with anything concerning the public interest. But nevertheless, it has been very much driving politics in the United States for many decades now.
Reverend Dr. Yuri, what are your thoughts? I've got about 2.5 minutes before we go to break. Dr. King said that, we have got to, this is killing black, white, brown, and black, white, and brown children. And really, he meant everybody. He said, you all can't even go to school together in the United States, but you can go to war together. There's something that's off about that. And spending so much of this budget, and we're not seeing any peace dividend. And we're more insecure than ever before, Reverend Dr. Erie.
Well, we're more insecure than ever before, and just remember the expectation of conflict is actually built into the Constitution. That the Army and Navy are clearly functions. There was an expectation that there would be an ongoing and lingering conflict potentially, but I don't think there was ever an understanding of how much it would cost. As a matter of fact, early in the revolution, there was a big defection of folks from being willing to fight in the Army because Washington could not pay the troops. And so I think what we've done is created this unnecessary dependence upon the economic investment short of return that we've got to work on and make sure that we right-size the moral frame of the budget so that we do get back to prioritizing what's important. And ultimately, that's the people.
Everybody, Dr. David Gibbs, Reverend Dr. Todd Erie. Let's talk about former President Trump. Should he be disqualified from running? John Nichols will be talking about that. He's written about that. It's a piece that's being released in The Nation magazine. But we want to kick things off at the top of the hour. John will be with us at 7:30, but I want to hear your thoughts. 773-763-9278. Should he be disqualified from running? Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. They say you need to be 35, live here 14 years, be a naturalized citizen. He meets those requirements. But the 14th Amendment says now, if you have, if you started an insurrection or something like that, well, now that's a problem. Problem with that is that Congress knocked some of those disqualifications down. Hey, everybody, you can't make this stuff up. Call me at 773-763-9278. Let's talk about former President Trump. Should he be disqualified from running for office? What do you think? Let's talk about it. Back in a minute. Oh boy, this is a lot. Every day, it's something. Every day. All these controversial topics. You keep inspiring me, Dr. Gibbs.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Is it great for, people listen, but it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It can make it difficult to get sponsors, but that's okay. Because I think it's, the issues I think that we discuss and raise, I think are very important. And I just can't thank you enough for your encouragement and your voice.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, it's good that, the truth of the matter is there aren't that many venues in the media where you can hear a range of opinions on these issues. So, you are presenting a range of issues, and your program is one of the few that does that.
I try. We try. We try because I think it's important that we bring these issues up. I think it's important that we do that. I think it's important that we do that, and so I don't feel like I'm missing anything, quite frankly. I feel very, very blessed. I really do. And so, I'm good, as they say. I'm good with it. I'm good. But so do you think that the president should be disqualified from running? I mean, I'm just reaching before we get there. What do you think?
Myself, no, I don't. I think that, it just is a very bad look that you have a situation where the leading contender, the leading challenger to the president of the United States, who would most likely be the Republican nominee, is going to be disqualified by a Justice Department appointed by his leading opponent, Joseph Biden. It looks political. And let's be frank, to the most part, it is political. And that's not a good reason. I mean, again, what Trump did was awful. But I think basically disqualifying him doesn't address the issue that close to half the country supports him. Mm-hmm. And you're still not addressing that, what to do about that half the country. And what do you do with half the country? Do you put them in prison too? I think basically this has to be dealt with politically, not legally. If the Democrats basically want to basically deal with this issue. They need to basically make a case why their party is better than Trump's, why they have more to offer the public than Trump does, and make the case that Trump is a bad politician with bad politics. They haven't done that, certainly not successfully.
Attorney Slane is on.
Flying him just seems like a very bad shortcut.
Look, honestly, I agree with you. Just I think this is
Yeah.
But but a lot of people don't, and and I'm okay with that. We've got Attorney David Slane. Attorney Slane, how you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm fine.
It's wonderful hearing your voice.
Wonderful to be heard, and I'm raring to go today.
Okay, I can hear. I can hear. Did you get your air conditioner fixed?
Thank goodness I did. It was a very simple thing, but when it's 100 degrees, you have to have air conditioning. It is just crazy.
Just don't even. You don't even have to tell me.
Yes. Well, went out in my car and I was wearing this suit and tie, driving down the road, and it just stopped working, and it was about 35, 40 minutes to get home, and I'll tell you what, it was miserable. Oh, it was terrible. But I'm good now.
Well, I want you to meet Dr. David. Well, I think you met Dr. David Gibbs from the University of Arizona, a brilliant historian, and Reverend Dr. Todd Urey.
Hello, Reverend. Nice to meet you.
Okay, now that's Attorney Slane and Reverend Urey.
Nice to
you
meet
all were
you.
just on with each other, so great.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you, Attorney. Good morning.
So let's get this started. I'm excited to hear all of this. Rubbing my hands together, everybody. Yes. You know what? I love it when I'm with. I love it when I'm with people who make me think. I love that. I love that. I do. And so, because these are the kinds of discussions that my parents would have around the dining room table, and we do these sorts of things, and we act these things out, quite frankly, for the holidays. We always pick a topic, and we put
Attorney Jones is on.
Thank you so much. We put somebody or something on trial, which sounds crazy, and it's big fun. We're like, who are you going to be? we act these things out for the holidays, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm really glad that you all are going to be here. Yes.
Well, Santita, let me say this. I just think you have a fantastic panel. Some of the panelists, while they may say things I've not really thought through, it's just fantastic at just how smart and enlightened they are. And I just appreciate you putting it all together.
Oh, you're very sweet. And I cannot tell you how much your support means to me. Really, it does. It means the world, because you all make it work. And I'm just keenly aware of the fact that you all are all brilliant, and we don't have enough outlets, or should I say, you all are not called. For example, this young man who I've had on, Keith Lamar, the head of the former president of the Black Prosecutors Association, for him not to be on CNN, I mean, I'm like, my goodness, he worked for Fani Willis. What else could you need? I mean, why isn't he on CNN in the morning? Why not?
1 minute.
You even have people who are not lawyers. I have 30 seconds.
Well, you said it right. You said it right the other day. They're all the wrong people asking all the right questions.
Unbelievable. When I pivot to one of our after I do the reading and I do the intro, please, Alex, put me on mute when I go to my first speaker, okay?
Sounds good. We have 30 seconds.
Okay.
Ten seconds.
All right, everybody, here we go. And I've got
Stand by.
the Hochberg read.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. And that's WCPT and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody, let's talk about former President Trump. Should he be disqualified from running for president once again? What happens if he's convicted? Eugene Debs, we'll get into that, actually ran from prison and got nearly 1 million votes. And this was 100 years ago. That's a whole lot of votes because there were a lot fewer people. So what do you think? What do you think? He meets the bare minimum requirement. Some people are saying the 14th Amendment should disqualify him. But then Congress really threw something out with respect to the Constitution itself. You know, one of the charges in this federal case related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, the conspiracy to violate civil rights. Once it used to carry a disqualifying penalty, but no longer because of Congress. So let's talk about that today. On the Santita Jackson Show. I want to get some of these headlines out the way. A judge set a new trial date for Donald Trump and his federal election case. It won't be March of 2026. It'll be March of 2024, the day before Super Tuesday, March 4th, everybody. It clashes with the 2024 campaign schedule, but nonetheless, that is when the trial begins, barring any kind of appeal. Florida is bracing for a major hurricane. Indeed, Hurricane Idalia has gathered to Hurricane 1 strength, but as it continues to rest over the warm waters of the Atlantic, they expect it to become a Category 3. A UNC Chapel Hill faculty member was killed in a campus shooting yesterday. Neither the person who committed the shooting, who was taken into custody, nor the professor who was shot have been named. The top Spanish soccer official, the president of the federation, Luis Rubiales, who kissed the Spanish player without her permission. Jenny Hermoso on the lips after Spain won the Women's World Cup. Well, he may or may not keep his job. He is under investigation. That was announced yesterday, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 82 degrees, scattered showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 80 degrees and clear. Major League Baseball, the Orioles shut out the White Sox 9-0. The Brewers bested the Cubs 6-2, but the Twins were triumphant 10-6 over the Guardians. In the WNBA, the Lynx and the Sky will be playing tonight. The Sky will be facing off against the Sparks, and the Lynx will be facing off against the Mystics. If there are tickets available, get out there and support those great sportswomen, everybody. You know, we are looking for financial freedom. I'm going to be talking about financial literacy and just the things that we can do even in these tough times, to not just keep our heads above water, but to prosper. Team Hochberg has a credit card now that can enable you to build your credit or to fix your credit. If you're in the 500s, they can take you to 600 and to 700 within a matter of months, maybe even a year, and you will have really solid credit. But there's also a program for first-time home buyers. You might have owned a home 5 years ago, even 4 years ago. But if you've not owned a home over the past 3 years, you could qualify for this program. That means you have not been a home buyer in the past 3 years. You can call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender, and you can get a home. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have watched the first-time homebuyers in the United States continue to spiral downward. 2 years ago, it was 34%. Now it's down to 26%. And the numbers continue to fall because we just don't have the money. You don't have solid enough credit to buy a home. But they're incentivizing first-time homebuyers with substantially lower mortgage rates. So if you live in the Chicago area and your total household income is $105,700, guess what? If you've not owned a home in the past 3 years, in addition to that, you might be able to buy a home this year, but you need to call them at 855-56-DAVID so that you can find out. 855-56-DAVID. I would also urge you to go to 56david.com, 56david.com, but don't stop there. If you think that you are on the verge of foreclosure, or if you've hit a hiccup financially and you might not be able to pay that mortgage, talk to them about it. They could advocate for you to help you to stay on track with keeping your home. So reach out to them, everybody. For this program, if you've not owned a home in the last 3 years, you might be able to own a home this year. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit 56david.com. That's Team Hochberg, everybody, your trusted local lender. Should former President Trump be able to run for president again? Some people are saying that what he did and what he is alleged to have done, because that is still, we have not tried that in court. We're going to see how that goes. Of course, he was impeached over the January 6th insurrection. What do you think? What do you think? Should he be disqualified? Should he be disqualified from running? What are the basic requirements? 35 years of age, live in the United States 14 years, be a naturalized citizen. Okay, he meets all of those benchmarks. But what about insurrection? What about insurrection? As I was sharing with you some years ago, if you violated civil rights, well, one of the charges in the federal case comes down to civil rights, that the civil rights of the citizens of Georgia were violated. And that once carried a disqualifying penalty, but no more. Congress wiped that out. So Congress has some space in this too, but let's talk about this. I mean, there is, and John Nichols will be on at the bottom of the hour to talk about this, but I've got a lot of lawyers here to talk to us, and an historian to talk to us about the legal fallout and the political fallout of this. Attorney David Slane, this is something that this has been stuck in your craw. So let's start with you. Should he be disqualified, and if so, upon what basis?
Well, good morning, Santita. I think so.
You are on mute.
Let me tell you, I had mentioned this to you and sent you. I don't know how many times I've sent you things, probably bugging you to death.
No.
About this. But let me say this. We know that under Article 2 of the Constitution, it sets out the requirements to hold office as a president in Congress and Senate. And it is 35 years of age, a natural-born citizen, and there's a provision in there for the founding fathers, or at least lived in the United States at the time the Constitution was adopted, because they were all born in, England, and that you've lived in the United States for 14 years. They don't want you to have left. And typically that's what we think of as the requirements. But as a result of the Civil War, we know that, there was a rebellion, an attempt to succeed the Union. And so as a result of that, the Congress and the people of the United States adopted the 14th Amendment, which we mostly think about as being freedom for African Americans. But what it also does under Section 3 is it says no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office. And it goes on to go through the military and all of that of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature or any executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, if they shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemy. Well, we know that's exactly what Donald Trump did. He was engaging in an insurrection, a rebellion, when he told them to go down there and march. Now, notice that provision doesn't say having been convicted of those things, just that you did it. Now, why do I say that this works? Why do I say this is important? In every state office, there are certain requirements. State legislature, city council. Let's just take a city councilman, for example, Santita. If you run for the city council, one of the requirements is that you live in the city. And if they find out you don't live in the city, we challenge that all the time, and the person's removed from the ballot. We see that from time to time. The person's not qualified. For example, in Oklahoma, to be a judge, you have to have been a lawyer for 5 years. So if I wasn't a lawyer for 5 years, they could kick me off the ballot. What we're going to have to do is take a real look at this and challenge former President Trump's qualifications. Now, we have a guideline, and I won't go on and on because you have other distinguished panelists, but remember, Lawrence Tribe of Harvard, who's a liberal constitutional scholar, and Judge Luttig, who was a appeals court judge that actually advised Vice President Pence during this time, both have come down and agreed that this applies. And so we also have a go-by. A New Mexico county commissioner has been removed from office and prohibited from running in the future because a judge found that he was engaged in an insurrection or rebellion when he was at the Capitol. He was only convicted of trespass and given 4 days in the jail. But the point is that we have a template. We have a way to challenge his qualifications. And the reason that they did this, Santita, and I'll just be quiet after this, is that they're traitors. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, if you are an insurrectionist, if you are a rebellionist against this government, against our government, you're a traitor. And if you're a traitor, you should not hold office. You have forfeited your right, essentially, under the 14th Amendment, Section 3. You forfeited your right to hold office. And it's already been used once, and I think there's going to have to be a concerted effort by lawyers to go in and challenge this. Normally, when you file for office, you go to a Secretary of State or an election board, and you file your paperwork. If somebody comes in there and challenges it, and we're going to have to be careful who can challenge, but they challenge it and get him removed from the ballot, he can't get elected if he's not on the ballot.
Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Attorney Jones, is Attorney Darrell Jones there?
Yes, I'm here.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that David is completely on point with regards to Section 3 and of the 14th Amendment and the challenges that are being possessed. I think presented to former President Trump. Very interestingly, two of the professors that are leading the charge regarding his disqualification from office actually come out of the Federalist Society. So, that's one of the bases that supports a lot of the judicial nominees that are on the federal court now. So when we look at where the challenges are coming from, it's not just progressives or liberals that are raising this Section 3 of the 14th Amendment challenge to President Trump's qualifications, but it's also coming from the conservative bloc itself and the very essence of it from the Federalist Society. So I think it's a very real issue that's being presented, and the question is going to become, how does he overcome it? Because it's not just progressives that are pushing on this issue, but also the conservative bloc. So that's going to be the interesting piece that's to it. We've never really seen it used in an election or for candidates that are running for president. So it's going to be interesting to watch it play out. It's not going to disappear. It's going to be there. It's going to be in its face, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. And again, it's going to be one of those pieces where we see if it's dealt with in a very balanced manner, because what we have happening here is a very popular candidate coming out of the Conservative Party, and we also going to have some very conservative professors that are challenging it along with progressives. So it's going to be interesting to watch it progress. I suspect that the 14th Amendment should prevail. But what does prevailing mean? Does it mean that it goes to a challenge to the court system? And does it go up to the Supreme Court? And if it makes it to the Supreme Court, what does the 6-3 supermajority court do? And, it's going to be another one of those pieces where we watch politics meet the judicial system, our legal system, and see what happens from there.
Call us at 773-763-9278. What say you? Should he be disqualified from running? Dr. David Gibbs, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with the other two people who spoke that, in the sense that I don't like Donald Trump or his politics, and I disagree with most of what he did as president. I think I would be very unhappy with the prospect of another Trump presidency. But it seems to me that's a political issue, not a legal issue. And I think it would be a bad move to try and disqualify him. I think it's a very bad move to indict him. The way someone like Trump has to be dealt with is politically. If you don't like Trump's politics, I do not like his politics, you need to make the case of why he's a bad politician and a bad person, perhaps, and argue the case and persuade people that is so. The Democrats have not done that so far, and I think the reason you're getting all of these efforts to put him in prison and disqualify him and so on is the Democrats seem to lack the ability to make a persuasive case and persuade the public. Let's not forget that Trump represents close to half of the voting population. What do you do with this voting population? I mean, do you disqualify them too? Do you put them in prison? Those people will still be around even if Trump is put in prison. And, it effectively disenfranchises them. And there's something disturbing about that. It's also disturbing to me that the people who would do the disqualification here would likely be the Justice Department and the Attorney General appointed by Joseph Biden, who happens to be Trump's leading opponent politically. Very likely, Biden and Trump will be the two nominees. And, it looks like, in Pakistan, you've repeatedly had situations where, prime ministers have been indicted. One of them was indicted and, in fact, I believe executed in the 70s. Another, Imran Khan, was recently indicted. And everybody knows it's political. It's being done because the people who now control the machinery of justice are his political enemies, and they're using the machinery of justice to attack him for political reasons. Unfortunately, what we're seeing with Trump does look a little bit like that, and does have a certain bad odor of illegitimacy to it. And, let us not forget the Democrats are not completely innocent in these things as well. It's, of course, true that Trump did deny the legitimacy of the 2020 election and did try to overturn it. Well, I don't think he came anywhere near close to doing so. I mean, the riot in the Capitol, as bad as it was, I'll be very frank and say it looked like it was a bunch of idiots, basically, who didn't know what they were doing. I don't think they came anywhere near overturning the election, but undeniably they tried. Well, the Democrats did something, I would say, somewhat comparable. In 2016, they denied the legitimacy of Trump's election. They came up with a harebrained idea as a result of the Russians. The Russians made Trump president. And they tried to block the inauguration of Trump by using the Central Intelligence Agency. And again, this is a matter of public record. The Central Intelligence Agency is not mentioned in the Constitution. But nevertheless, the Democrats, or at least major figures in the party, notably Hillary Clinton, proposed doing precisely that. Again, I think it was just as crazy and absurd as what the Republicans did, trying to overturn the 2020 election. And it didn't go anywhere. But it was openly proposed as an idea. So I just don't see really this is the sort of tit for tat we're getting here. The idea that we don't like Trump, so we'll indict him, we'll disqualify him, and so on. The Republicans will do the same thing just as soon as they can. This will destabilize and poison American politics. And, it just isn't a very good precedent to set. And again, I would just rather have an open discussion of, okay, if you don't like Trump, why don't you like him? If you think he's bad for the public, what about him is bad? The Democrats need to make that case. And I think they're wasting their time trying to basically put Trump behind bars, trying to disqualify him. That could be better used, trying to discredit him based on good reasons.
Reverend Dr. your thoughts?
Well, again, good morning, Santita. There are a couple of things. One, the former president he's not going to trial because he's disliked. He's going to trial because he's been indicted. And while we talk about the very low standard for indictment just means that there's probable cause determined by a panel of grand jurors that a crime has been committed. In this instance, you now have 4 indictments, 2 federal, 2 state, And so it is where it is. So this isn't, he's not being indicted because he's unpopular. He's being indicted because citizens who sat in the grand jury pool heard whatever evidence was presented and they came back with an indictment. So let's put that off to the side. Whether or not that's the most prudent course, I think that is certainly open for debate, but that's not popularity. The 14th Amendment element and the fact that it is one of the Civil War amendments, and the notion of insurrection, which led to the Civil War, which led to the RIP. We know the history of it. That becomes, I think, a little more difficult question in terms of how we interpret and apply it. What's interesting to me, and Attorney Darrell Jones raised it, is that the biggest advocates for the application of that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment are not Democrats. Judge Ludig is not a Democrat. What the Republican Party has is they have a war within its own ranks. Who's going to control the party? Because the leader of the party is compromised and to some degree complicit with the current issues we have with both the insurrection at the Capitol and the ongoing disruption of the right to vote, including the intimidation of poll workers as part of that practice where he actually enabled and actually created agents and ambassadors to go out and do his bidding for him. So I think we got to get to the core of what's really here. Whether or not Trump makes it through this, do you want another version of him that just learns from the fact that not only do you do it, but that you could do it and not have to answer for it? That's, I think, the deeper moral question that's got to be resolved. And I think that's the question that's before us in real time.
Well, we will see. We're going to have John Nichols, who's written an amazing piece in the Nation magazine talking about this, the disqualification. But, the issue is also, I would say, gentlemen, to all of you, it does look political. All these prosecutions are political. They are. And when you step back, that is what it looks like. Has he been accused of things that which he might be found guilty? Of course. But the fact is, half the country feels that this is highly political and this is highly problematic for all of us. It would have been so much better if this had been pursued earlier, certainly by another administration. But that's not what we have here. And boy, we have got some issues before us. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Okay, you guys, have at it. Love it.
Santita, to that last point, I don't know how you get much earlier in the analysis than after January 6th and the new Congress is seated. Remember, the day before was the runoff election in Georgia. There was a lot at stake. It is political. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution as a political document, it is political. Mm-hmm. The question is, and you often kind of challenge us on this, is what say we about our politics? Can our politics withstand this question about accountability? And if not, do we have a political system at all, or are we just winging it and flying by the seat of our pants? That's
John Nichols is on.
For me, and what I'm hearing for regular everyday folks, and most of them don't even participate in the process. Many of them haven't been disqualified because of challenges with the criminal justice system. But when they're looking at this, and you have folks who got jammed up on minor stuff, still having to deal with the collateral consequences of their rather minor deeds, I think we should be careful about giving the impression that someone can get a pass simply because they have held a certain office or hold a certain position or opinion in the society. That carries very ominous implications for what the blowback will be, not in the political class, mm-hmm. but in the rank and file, to say to those who've done some of this that you can do it and not have to be accountable for it.
Well, I think that the Russia story should have carried a lot of weight because it was an obvious lie, and it was very damaging, very damaging. but no one has spoken to that. And one of the things that I think that we've got to do is have a transpartisan moment. And the Constitution itself should be transpartisan. And issues like this should be transpartisan, but that's not what we're seeing. That was such an obvious lie. It was so far beneath Hillary Clinton and who she is who I believe her to be. And we just continue to tell these lies. Russia. I mean, someone who for whom I have tremendous respect yesterday just out the blue said, well, Putin killed Prigozhin. I'm like, how do you know that? Nothing's been proved yet. A lot of people wanted him dead. A lot of folks. But we don't do that now. We don't. And I think that I'm not going to speak for you, Doctor. And hey, John, how you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. I just, you caught us in medias res, in the middle of the action. I don't want to presume to speak for you, Dr. Gibbs, but no one is saying that that Trump is right. No one is, certainly he's not saying it. I'm not saying it. But this does look absolutely political. It does. And you just got to go on and see what it is. Hey, I'll say till the cows come home. My brother's conviction was political. It absolutely was. And matters like this are. And we know it. We know it. The thing is, you have half the country. There's something called realpolitik. The fallout is real on this thing. David keeps telling us about what he's seeing in Oklahoma. And I have been in places, because all you have to do is drive outside of Chicago about 20, 25 minutes. And they play country and Western music. I didn't say Shania Twain. I said Patsy Cline. That's where I'm living. Okay? And you can walk into some restaurants just outside of Chicago, and they do not want you there. And you feel the freeze. And you feel it all over the country. And that, to me, is dangerous. And I'm not saying that you should step away from a rightful prosecution because of politics, not because of partisanship. We misuse politics. Politics are in everything. But my goodness, I think you have to factor all of these things in.
Stand by.
Stand by. We're coming in.
This is the.
Sorry about that. Got interrupted for a second.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am
Oh boy, we have been talking during the commercial break. You gotta meet us over on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Call us at 773-763-9278. Here at WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, as we talk about Trump and whether he should be disqualified from running for president. Of course, you know what time it is. It's 7:30, well, 7:34 Central Standard Time on Tuesday. So it's time for John Nichols. But John Nichols, my panel wanted to stay and engage because this is a topic that is before us now. It could become a constitutional crisis. Indeed, your new piece in the Nation reads the headline: "The conservatives who read the Constitution found that it disqualifies former President Trump." Indeed, that is what we're finding. And yet half the nation won't even hear. And of course, you're joined by Oklahoma civil rights attorney David Slane, who really inspired this segment because he said, Santita, it's the 14th Amendment. It is just straightforward. That's it. He betrayed the country. That's it. And of course, I'm oversimplifying. Attorney Darrell Jones, chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, National Leadership Team at Rainbow Push, and historian Dr. David Gibbs, who's kind of an outlier, along with me, but that's all right. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's wonderful to hear all of these thoughts. What do you assert in your piece or should I say, what do the conservatives assert that you wrote about in this wonderful piece in the Nation?
Well, Santita, it's great to be on with all these wise souls. And let me begin by suggesting that this extends from what you were just saying a moment ago, this desire to get beyond the sort of simplistic arguments and frankly, the very political arguments to some core concepts. And here's an interesting thing. Right after January 6th, I wrote a piece with the great historian Eric Foner. And Eric Foner said at that time, he's, of course, the great historian of the Civil War period and the post-Civil War, the Reconstruction. And he argued immediately, look, what Trump has done here in seeking to overturn the results of the 2020 election is a violation of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which says if you take an oath to the country and then foment revolution or foment insurrection, seek to overturn the government, you're disqualified from holding office going forward. This is a post-Civil War amendment, but it has always been interpreted to extend beyond the Civil War period. It wasn't, you don't have sections of the Constitution just written for a moment. They are, in fact, permanent. And so I wrote about that at that time. And to be honest, the political types didn't take it very seriously. They went forward with the impeachment, which was appropriate, but you knew that the Senate would not be sufficient because Mitch McConnell lacks the courage to govern. And so as a result, you ended up with the highest number of votes ever to convict a president of high crimes and misdemeanors, but not a sufficient number to disqualify him. And so in the aftermath of that, I wrote a lot about the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and the fact that look, we have an imperial presidency. We have a presidency where the person holding office is not held to account, and we, for many decades, a very long time now, have not held presidents to account for their wrongdoing while in office. But now we see an extension of the imperial presidency, so that even when they are no longer in office, they still have all these protections, all these royal protections, because we don't apply the Constitution. And I wrote a lot about that. John Bonifaz, the great constitutional lawyer, talked about it, and some others did as well. But to be quite honest, many of us were on the left. And so, there was always a pushback, not so much from, conservatives as there was from the mainstream media, which is always defending, sort of a centrist inaction, a refusal to take seriously politics because they want to play the games of money and insider connection. But recently, there's been a fascinating development that a growing number of conservative scholars, people who might be more traditionally associated with the Republican Party, have said, look, you can't read the 14th Amendment and Section 3 and interpret it not to apply in this circumstance. That's absurd. It's comic. It is a contortion done by political types and by media types who don't want to hold presidents or former presidents to account, doesn't want to apply basic standards to them. And in the debate last week, Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, a very conservative individual, and one that served in the Bush administration in a number of capacities, but also a former U.S. attorney, a person who can justifiably be referred to as a legal scholar and a constitutional scholar, said on the stage, look, he wasn't going to promise to endorse President Trump in 2024, President Trump, because former President Trump could be disqualified for his actions. And that would be absurd to say you're going to endorse such a person. So he brought the 14th Amendment into the debate. And here's the thing to understand. There are a lot of people who are afraid of applying the 14th Amendment because they say, oh, it'll be divisive. Oh, it will be, it won't. For some reason or another, it will do more harm than has already been done to the Republic. What I would argue is failing to apply the 14th Amendment at this point continues the imperialization of the presidency. It makes presidents more supreme and former presidents immune from responsibility. And it just comes a question. This isn't about Trump. This is about the office. At what point do we take seriously that presidents are not kings? At what point do we say, look, whether a president is a Democrat or a Republican, conservative or liberal, they have to meet certain standards. You got to be 35 years old. You have to be born in the U.S. You have to have not fomented an insurrection. I mean, these are basic standards outlined in the Constitution. At what point do we take it all seriously? And if the answer is we're not going to do so now, there's not going to be any point where we do so, then you might as well put the Constitution aside, and you might as well accept that we as a republic founded in opposition to the divine right of kings and monarchy have decided that we are going to have effectively kingly officials, elected despots, if you will, who will never be held to account. And so it's really it's a simple question that conservatives and liberals have begun to agree on, that if you don't take 14.3 seriously, then you're not really taking the Constitution very seriously.
Well, we're talking with John Nichols from the Nation magazine, talking about people on the right who feel that former President Trump should be disqualified for running for office again. Donnie D says there should be a very simple standardized test in order to qualify to vote. He says similar to acquiring a driver's license. John Cunningham says it's cut and dry. It's overwhelmingly clear. He's guilty as charged. But my question for you is, should he be able to run again? Karen Lene says, so the past speaker is minimizing Trump's crimes and saying both parties are the same old dangerous narrative, rarely a discussion of his crimes and policies. I think she was speaking of you, Dr. Gibbs. Would you like to respond to that? Was Dr. Gibbs still there? Okay. Well, I don't think that's what he was saying. And basically, you have a duopoly, to be fair, Karen. You can't get the Green Party on the stage to debate during the presidential debates. You cannot get anyone other than the Democrats and the Republicans, and they both support the corporatocracy. That is established. So the question is this a politicized process? Prosecutions are. Prosecutions become persecutions. We have to be mindful of the fact that about half the country supports President Trump, and they are digging in their heels. That's not a reason not to pursue a prosecution, but the timing, you always have to be sensitive to all of those things. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. What say you, John Nichols? I mean, where do we go with all this? This is such a polarized atmosphere. I cannot help but think that this Ryan Palmeter, who went to kill all these black students at Edward Waters College, thank goodness the security stopped him. But that's what he meant to do. He ended up at the dollar store. He started at a black college, knowing that that campus would be teeming with students, hundreds, if not thousands of students, because that's before we start class. I went to an HBCU, but those of us who went to college, period. I mean, you are so glad to see each other, having been away from each other for 2 or 3 months or whatever the period of time is. You're there. And he knew that he would be able to get a maximum kill, if you will. This is such a dangerous moment, John. It's just a dangerous moment. Even A. Philip Randolph, when he went to FDR, he said, look, you're lynching us throughout the South. Black people don't have our full rights, and you want us to go vote. You want us to go march and work in this World War II effort. Are you serious? In a segregated army? And I've got to fight for democracy overseas? Black folks don't want to do it. And we need jobs here. FDR said, you're right. You're right. Now go out and march and make me do it.
Well, I think it's more, I think there's a subtlety there with A. Philip Randolph.
Yeah.
When Roosevelt said to A. Philip Randolph, go out.
Sent you a text on who's on.
Initially, it was earlier on in the administration. Then you came to when the war was actually there, when you had reached that moment. And Roosevelt and others pleaded with Randolph not to march, not to go forward and challenge them with the March on Washington movement. And Randolph said, no, we are not going to back down, even though it is dangerous, even though there are all these threats. And similarly, when Randolph called the 63 March on Washington, President Kennedy and others wanted them not to march because they said, if you bring all these people to Washington, there's going to be great danger, great threats, terrible security problems and that. And again, Randolph and Dr. King said, no, we have to go forward. There has to be a point at which we demand these rights, that we don't stand down, and we don't let you make another excuse for telling us why we can't do that which is right and that which is necessary. And so I do think there are certain moral moments, right, where we ask ourselves, are we going to rise to the occasion, or are we going to be afraid to do the right thing, right? Are we going to say, well, we'll put it off now and we'll find some time in the future where we'll do the right thing. The great genius of A. Philip Randolph was, again and again,
just recent.
He chose to push the envelope to demand rights, and he succeeded. Roosevelt, afraid of the prospect of a march on Washington in 1940-41 there, integrated the defense industries. In 48, as the Red Scare was coming on, all these other challenges, Randolph demanded integration of the military. Truman resisted. Randolph said, well, then we're going to march. And on the conventions, Truman agreed to integrate the military. And then in 63, the Kennedy administration, sympathetic to civil rights, but not really moving on it, Randolph said, we're going to march. And they did march. And it had this profound impact that Kennedy and others began to move more aggressively on some of these fundamental issues. And ultimately, the tragedy of Kennedy's assassination, but in its aftermath, Lyndon Johnson moving even more aggressively on Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. And we should note the amendment to the Constitution to end the poll tax. And so I think that when we look at all of these issues, what we have to recognize is that at some point there is a challenge to rise to something higher, to rise above the petty politics of the moment, the Democrat versus Republican, conservative versus liberal, and to ask yourself a core question. Are there standards that ought to be applied, right? Are there basic premises that ought to be embraced?
And there's no question.
The great challenge in the current moment is that both parties, I believe, both Democrats and Republicans, prefer to avoid, by and large, the really deep and challenging questions.
But we do. But
and one of those deep and challenging questions
is this:
are we going to have an imperial president?
Well, I mean, but that's been the resistance since the founding of the republic. Will George Washington be a king? He's the one who said no. We just stopped that. You have Lincoln who said, you know what, we need to welcome our brethren back into the Union, and we still haven't worked that out. We're still 150 years later trying to work out the Civil War. Even though many people said these people are traitors to the country, you must punish them. Lincoln said, no, we're one people. We've got to reunite the country. And we're almost at that Civil War moment again. And I'm not saying that you're not supposed to prosecute people who commit misdeeds and certainly malfeasances against the state. I'm just looking at so many other factors that you and I both know how politics works. And that is why Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon. That is why the leadership went to Nixon and said, hey, the country's going to come apart. You need to resign. It was Democrats and Republicans who did that. And he agreed to resign. So, I'm just saying that there are other arguments that are being made. And I certainly don't want, as I'm looking, on the chat line, I don't want Dr. Gibbs' integrity to be attacked, because that is not where he's coming from at all. And at the same time, I think some conservatives are taking hits as well. Their integrity should not be attacked because they see the Constitution in a particular way. They see this moment in a particular way. How do we work our way through this? Before I spread the question to the rest of, to the people listening to you today, John, how do we work our way through this? Because this is a moment. Sarah Palin said it's a Civil War moment. One of the few times she and I agree.
Well, and you have to be clear on it. And look, here's the interesting thing, and I think a lot about Lincoln, especially in times like this. And Lincoln was an incredibly great president in so many ways, but he also failed in many ways. He did not go as far as he should have. His treatment of Native Americans was atrocious. His determination to address not just slavery, but the aftermath of slavery was a struggle. And sometimes he did what was needed to be done. Sometimes he did not. One of his greatest failures was replacing Hannibal Hamlin with his first vice president, with Andrew Johnson, his second vice president. Johnson, an incompetent and a mess of an individual. And that ruined the Reconstruction period. Lincoln wanted Reconstruction to work, I believe, and yet made choices based in fear, by the way. Lincoln feared that he would lose the presidency in 1864. And so he switched vice presidents. And we ended up with Andrew Johnson through most of what would have been Lincoln's term because of the assassination. And so it is an interesting question when we let fear guide us, right? When we say, well, I'm afraid if we do this, bad things will happen. Sometimes when we allow the fear to guide us, we end up in a situation where the bad things or worse things happen. And so at some point we have to ask ourselves, where do we apply the basic standards, right? Where do we say, look, there is a consensus, a part of liberals and conservatives, serious people who look at the Constitution, that our presidency shouldn't be imperial, that presidents should be held to account when they do wrong, that they shouldn't be given a free pass. And we have again and again failed in that regard. And to be quite clear, Gerald Ford failed when he pardoned Nixon. And the Iran-Contra Committee failed when it did not hold Reagan and Bush to account for their lawlessness in Iran-Contra.
And so
Congress
my question
failed
is,
in many ways.
why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do that? Can the argument be made because they were more invested in the military-industrial complex than peace? They let them go, and they lied, and millions of people died.
And they're more.
You have a caller.
More invested in a cautious politics that doesn't set basic standards. And frankly, I think both parties are very invested in the imperial presidency. They like the idea that if you win the presidency, you pretty much, have this dominance in our politics, even if you end up with a Congress that might be in opposition. And so the end result is that as a country, we have become very fluid as regards our standards. We're not fluid as regards our standards for working class people. I mean, boy, a group of working class people try to organize a union. If they fail to dot an I or cross a T, they're tossed out, right? They're barred
Or if they
from doing
march
it.
on
Right-to-work
Washington.
laws is virtually impossible.
Or if they march on Washington, it's almost called an insurrection.
Absolutely.
I mean, let us not forget that Washington, D.C. closed down in 1963. The fear was so great that these nonviolent demonstrators were going to shut the city down. Let me bring on Paul from Seattle. Paul has called and he wants to say something to you. Paul?
Yeah, good morning. Yes. The question of it, is it a civil war? Good morning, thanks. Is it a civil war moment? Well, in our first civil war, it was not about somebody. It wasn't about Abraham Lincoln. It was about a fundamental issue or fundamental issues of the founding and the what this republic is about. If they're going to make it, and people say it's a civil war moment because it's about Donald Trump, that's a very different question. And as far as he's concerned, Santita, I'll say this: forgiveness also requires repentance, and we have not seen anything like that from Donald Trump. So for people like Sarah Palin and others who have said, "Oh, it's civil war now," because if you dare apply the rule of law to this man, and they're the ones who are always complaining about the double standard of justice. If you apply the rule of law to this man, it's going to be a civil war. Well, I'll tell you something. I was talking to a guy from Kosovo a while ago, and he said these people don't know what they're saying. A civil war doesn't mean inflation is going to be 8 or 9 or 10%. It's going to be 1,000 or 10,000%, or you won't be able to buy things at all. The grocery stores won't have groceries in them if there's a civil war. So these people don't know what they're talking about, and it's a lot of, frankly, it's just hostility, and I don't know where it comes from, except for racism is obviously a big part of it, and that's their problem. I think that we need to apply the rule of law equally to show the people, in fact, to show the MAGA people more than anyone, that there is a standard of justice in this country.
Well, I mean, I hear you. I mean, that having been said, and in furtherance of your point, I disagree with them on a lot of issues. I mean, and the point is, for me, when they talk about weaponizing the government against a person, please, I'm from that space. I'm from a family who the government has been weaponized against us. They weaponized the government against Dr. King. That's why he is dead. So I'm hearing you. So they lose credibility with me because we have a lot of whataboutism going on all the way around us. And it bothers me, John, because so much of our politics is personality based and it's not principle based. And that for me is the problem. It can be our undoing, John.
Absolutely. And so I think this is where we get into a very, very difficult space because we have personalized so many of these struggles for so long, and we have partisanized so many of these struggles for so long. The questions about Richard Nixon's lawlessness, the questions about Ronald Reagan's lawlessness, questions about George H.W. Bush's lawlessness, the questions about Bill Clinton's lawlessness, the questions about George Bush's lawlessness, again and again and again. It's all about, do you like this guy? Do you dislike this guy? Are you mad at this guy for something he did? Are you not mad at this guy? And what we fail to do is look at the office itself and say, do you want the presidency of the United States to be a monarchical position? Do you want it to be above all else? Or do you want the President of the United States to be, as it was intended in the founding of the country, a servant, right? Somebody who served the people who elected that individual for a brief period of time and then who went back into the class of citizens. You make the president accountable. And we are at that point of question right now. And frankly, we've failed again and again and again and again. And the question really is, will we fail as regards the former president in this circumstance? And I think there's a very real possibility that we will, because the imperial presidency has a very strong constituency in both political parties and in the pundit class.
Absolutely. I mean, it bothers me that we didn't look at, Iraq was one of the greatest travesties in human history. The Lancet study said there were 1 million people killed, and they said that a couple of years in. Nobody has said anything about it. And for me, it's just problematic that we continue to fail. We get a failing grade, John, on this constantly. And it doesn't speak well of us, and it doesn't help us. So when we come at this kind of moment, when you have someone who could have upended the government, you have me going, okay, look, we killed 1 million people at least, and tried to fudge those numbers, and we said nothing. That's 1 million people, John. 1 million. They might not speak my language, they might not look like me, but it's 1 million people. When are we going to stop?
Can I jump?
Okay, I got about 20 seconds. Say it, Dave Slade.
We got to remember and refocus. We're talking about the qualifications of the presidency. We're not talking about politics. We're talking about the Constitution. Should he be excluded? Has he been a part of an insurrection or rebellion? That's the question for the courts.
I hear you. That's the question for the courts. But the politics is that the courts are political too. Look at the Supreme Court. No one trusts any of this stuff. That's the danger of the moment in which we find ourselves. We'll be talking about this and so much more on the Santita Jackson Show tomorrow. Everybody stay here. I'm going to get closing thoughts from everybody except John Nichols, who's running right now, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Paul, thank you for calling in from Seattle. God bless you, everybody. Alex, thank you for a great show. John, I know you're running. Do you have time to say anything more?
I am. Well,
John Nichols is on, Attorney Jones, and Attorney Slane are on.
And how wonderful that people disagree on this. This is what this show, and frankly, what America ought to be about. You ought to have debates about this and about these issues. And boy, we went deep here. No one's integrity should be impugned for where they stand on this. If they agree with me or if they disagree with me, if they agree with Asa Hutchinson or disagree with Asa Hutchinson, if they agree with you, disagree with you, whatever it is, the bottom line is we are at our healthiest when we have these deeper, better discussions. And boy, do you create a great forum here.
Well, and for the record, I agree with you. I just have questions. Ooh, I used to get into it. Well, because in my family, you know us, and John, you've known us for a long time. We debate, and so the thing is, I'm accustomed to debating and hugging, kissing, and going on. I mean, having a real fight in the midst of it. So I agree with John, but I am asking questions.
And you debate to get someplace, right?
Thank you.
That's the point. Some people debate just for the sake of debating, or even for slowing down the process, to be quite honest. But some people debate because they want to get someplace. They want to make sure that when they move forward, they've sorted out all the issues, they've asked all the questions, they've tried to answer them, and then they say, okay, we've reached some kind of consensus here. Let's do this. And in my experience, that has been my observation of your family. is that, yes, there's a lot of debate. And then there is a decision to open the front door and march out together and go do something incredible.
Boom.
And
is
that
what we do.
history is something I value immensely.
You're right. That is
And
what we do.
Santita,
Yes, David Slane.
Santita, I just want to jump in and compliment what a fantastic article it was in the Nation. I thought that you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if you're a lawyer by legal training or background, but I will tell you, I am a lawyer and I have that legal training and background and 30 years of experience. And I sat down with this issue specifically and looked at it and looked at how it was applied to this commissioner in New Mexico. You did a fabulous job. I'm so grateful that you brought this out there to the public's attention.
And let me just say this,
I
Karen.
appreciate that very much.
Karen says,
And on those kind words, I'm going to, go ahead.
Oh, no. I wanted to say, Karen said you insult us to say it's personal as if we're not well informed. Karen, that is not my point. And you should know better than that. I do not seek to insult or hurt anybody. I was speaking of prosecutions, just generally speaking, they are political in nature. Anytime George W. Bush was not prosecuted, anytime the Supreme Court can give us a president, ram him down our throat, that's personal. That's political. It's partisan. And it's not just partisan. This is about corporatocracy and those politics. So that's what I'm saying. I don't seek to insult you. I don't think that you're not well informed, but I tell you what, I've been in the room where a lot of these decisions are made. And so what I try to bring to the show every day is that knowledge and that experience. I'm not saying I'm always right, but I can say to you, when I look at things, I go, no, there might be a little bit more going on here than I see. That this can be above my pay grade, and I'm not, I'm no general. I'm just saying, I've just seen some things that make me question a whole lot all the time, Karen. So insulting you,
and let me leave.
That's not my thing.
Let me leave. Let me take my leave at this point because I have to. But let me say, as someone who has known Santita Jackson for more of my life than I have not known her, that I've never known a person who is less inclined to insult anyone. And that's a big deal because that's what makes this show so important and so special. And that is that as a host, Santita, you ask very difficult questions, you challenge, but you don't do so to diminish or to dismiss their view. You challenge to ask them to kind of bring their view out more, to give us a deeper explanation, to make sure that we, your guests, sometimes your callers, that we really are serious about what we're saying. And it is that seriousness that you bring to it that is a real treasure. And I value it immensely. I wish I could stay longer. I do have to leave today, but we'll do this again, and I look forward to it.
We'll be watching. I might call you before Tuesday. John? Before
you go, I again want to compliment you on a great article, and I'm so grateful you brought this to the public's attention.
Thanks. I so appreciate that. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
And I've tweeted it out, and I have Facebooked it and all of that, and we're going to continue to push that out there because you need to hear and see more of this. Attorney Jones, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with all that Dave and John were saying, and certainly, kudos to John for the article, as David was saying, which is incredibly done and informative. So one of the things that we were talking about, and I was just listening to the conversation, and I believe that whenever there's a prosecution of a political figure, that it automatically becomes political. Because you have, people, citizens that have invested their vote in these political figures, and they're going to believe that you're going after their guy or their person wrongfully, and they're going to try to stick with the person that they've invested in. So it's automatically going to become political whenever there's a prosecution of a political figure, and needless to say, the level of the political figure when we're dealing with the former President Trump, that just takes it to another level because of who he is and what he has stood for and what he continues to stand for. And he's one of those people that it is going to try to use the political process to fight against his prosecution, and that's I think a large part of what we're seeing happen right now. Interestingly, and Santita, I
But I wanted to get, I think Reverend Yuri, are you still there? Oh, okay. And Attorney Slane, your closing thought. This was your idea. Yeah, and or Canadian national like Ted Cruz, who they let run, even though he wasn't born here. I mean, I'm just tired of the slide rule that we have here. You know what I mean? You remember when they went back? You remember when they went back to Congress and passed a law so that John McCain could run because he was not born in the United States, but he was born on a base? I mean, I'm not mad. He was serving. His father was serving. That wasn't his fault. He was an American. His father was serving. His mother was pregnant overseas. Boom. And it's not the same thing. I'm simply saying I agree with you, but I'm also asking questions because I am very clear that politics, real life, plays a role in all of this. That is why, as right as Dr. King was in opposing the Vietnam War, his chief of staff walked up to him at Riverside Church as he walked out of the pulpit and said, "You have just signed your death warrant." He said, "I know, but I had to do it." And we knew it. I was about 2 or 3 at the time. My parents knew it. They were like, he was right. And the harassment from J. Edgar Hoover and our government. Would you talk about a weaponized government? They killed that man a year to the day, to the minute that he announced his opposition to the war. And I am tired of seeing all of this stuff partisanized and weaponized. I'm saying if you go after him, okay, then I wish you'd take a look at Bush, because 1 million people at least have been killed because of his actions on lies. And I'm tired of it. And we just continue to lie, and no one gets prosecuted for it if they support the military-industrial complex. It just makes me sick. I mean, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying prosecute him. I'm saying it's going to happen when these folks decide. And one of the things that you do see here too, when the government decides to come after you, you are at their mercy. That frightens me too. To be honest, I'm keeping it 100 as someone who lived under government surveillance. I asked for my FBI file and they kind of laughed. I was like, I got you, keep it. Yeah. I'm a kid. Since I was a kid? Really? Come on. So I'm just saying, I hear you. I agree with you. That having been said, I always look at the politics of the matter. I'm always going to do that. Because politics to me, it's always a factor. So do you. Keep sending it. Keep sending it, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm no lawyer, but can't you file a friend of the court brief and things like that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see. We'll see, and we'll see who's going to challenge it. We'll see. We'll see. But I mean, I think these are the issues. I mean, look, we are at a very, very important moment in our history as an American people. And so we will see. We shall see. We shall see. And I'm looking forward to it all. But I thank you. Continue to send me things, David, please. 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 Oh, always enjoy you. Oh, look, you'll hear from me a little bit later because they'll come up with something today. Whew. Sending you all so much love. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Okay. For performance CQ. Oh. You gotta keep hope alive. Because if you don't, you will not keep going. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. Sending no, and you're right. Please, we'll keep it alive as long as we keep saying it. That's the truth. So I'm sending you much love today. Please be careful out there and drink some water in all that heat. Bye-bye. Daryl Jones, I'm sending you much love today. Alex, I'm sending you much love today. Everybody, I'm sending you much love. Hey, and my whole group. I don't know what goes on with the sound. It just goes out on me. I don't know. But I'm glad that you all are still there, sending you all so much love. And you know what? Hey, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And even if we disagree with one another, even and as we disagree with one another, let us respect one another, period. Just because someone does not agree with you does not mean they disrespect you. So be careful how you say it. Get on the other side of what you say to someone. Be careful. Be careful. Listen to what you said and how you said something. Think about how it lands on someone else's ear. Think about how it would land on yours. Think about that. Let's be kind to each other and let's go on and disagree if we must. It's okay. And question. It shows that you're thinking. I love y'all. God bless you. Sending you much love, Carolyn and D. Ray. And I don't know whether they're saying the sound is there, you guys. So I'm loving you, and I'm out.